Hello everybody and welcome to Tree Week 2021. This video is produced by the community of Caledonian and it's all about trees around Inishowen. There are foresters explaining the history of trees in Inishowen and some of the planting that's taken place today. There's farmers showing the contribution that trees can do to our own farming, and there's beekeepers in it, as well as a whole load of members of Inishowen community, of Caledonian community, and some of the tree planting that they have done. So enjoy this video, get yourself a cup of tea, sit back, relax, and afterwards don't forget to plant a tree.
My name's Ross Buchanan and I'm a forester here in Donegal, and right now we're standing in a pretty good example of an ancient oak habitat. This is, to give it the scientific name, it's Quercus ilex blechnum woodland, so it's Annex 1 habitat. It's internationally important habitat. Once upon a time, a lot of Ireland was covered with it, and now we're down to a very, very low percentage, most of which is really not in good condition. But it's essentially it's habitat dominated by oak, but with elements of holly, birch, hazel. And the reason that it's of such international importance is that it's got a very rich assemblage of lichens and liverworts, so mosses, etc., bryophytes essentially. It's a kind of a classical example of what we call Celtic rainforest, and you find it along the west of Ireland, up into the west of Scotland, even in Wales, and as I say, it's of international importance. After the last ice age, what was Inishowen like? It was a very bare place because it had been scoured by the ice and there was nothing there, just rock and crumbled, eroded stone. So after the ice age, you had trees coming in from the continent and recolonising the island. So first of all, you had the Scots pine and the birch that came here, and then next you had some of the broadleaves coming after it. You had the oak and the elm that came in, colonised the more fertile areas and took over from Scots pine, and Scots pine was pushed out to the more extreme fringes, the upland areas and so forth. In about 3000 BC, the climate started to change. The area became wetter and colder, and that extra moisture and the coolness meant that vegetation stopped breaking down in the upland areas and started to form layers of peat, and the peat built up, and the Scots pine was killed off as the peat layers rose. And so we've got huge areas that had been pine forest that are now mummified, as it were, under the peat. And here the peat's been removed for turf production, and we're getting glimpses of this great pine forest that once covered the uplands of Inishowen. And it's something that would have been very similar to the pine woods you would find today in Scotland, the Caledonian pine forest. So upon a time, these hills around Inishowen were just a vast Scots pine forest. So, as I say, once a very important native Irish tree, but long gone, and now all we've got is a snapshot hidden under the bog.
So my name is Patrick Mccartney here, and I have a small farm. It's my grandfather's farm, and it's 6.5 acres. So I decided way back about 4 years ago to look into forestry. So there was a lovely deal going from the foresters. So I contacted them, and they said, I should come down and look, is it suitable for a native woodland, oak woodland. So they came down and they said yes, it was. So then I approached a local forester, and he says yeah, he would do the job for me. So we went on with it then, and got our things all together, and we planted out there last year 4.5 acres, just under 4.5 acres of native Irish woodland, with oak being the main tree that you want in. So we did that, and the great thing about it was very lucrative in a way. It was very good because they supplied all the trees free. The forester work was paid for, And then subsequent years after that, he would maintain it. And then a little bit of fencing was in the deal as well. And then on top of that then was a yearly fee, which is good for the forest to look after it for 15 years. So everything about it was very good, and it's all taken care of with the grants. So that is a lovely start.
And I find that the more they know about things, the more that they care about it, and then they will hopefully pass down that love for future generations. Alice, do you want to tell us a little bit about what we learned this week about the hazel?
Okay. Well, these guys turn into the male.
These are the males here, yep.
The males, and the females will turn into these guys.
Little red flowers, right? We don't have any on that branch there, but that's right. And then we looked it up in our nature, our book, and we identify. So we learn about the catkins and the little female, the buds, and then we draw pictures of what we find.
Well, the woodlands mean a lot to me because I love playing in the trees, and because sometimes I see squirrels, and I love the birds when they sing their songs and all that stuff. It's just lovely because then you can see stuff on the ground like little beetles, and sometimes you can see little worms coming up, sticking their heads up from the surface. And then there's also nice types of birds you can see. Like sometimes there could be hawks, sometimes there could be bluebirds. You know, there can be quite rare type of birds, but sometimes I think in different countries when I see trees getting chopped down, I think it's not nice. I mean, like, who would want to chop down animals' habitats? Because the woods are the best things ever because there's habitats in it. I mean, there could be owls hiding in hollow trees and nobody would know it, and there could be bees as well.
Hello, my name is Abdul, and I am from Syria, and I was living here for 3.5 years. And I want to talk about why we need to plant trees. So I am a beekeeper, and I have my beehives here, you know, see here. So all made from the wood. So we need to focus about our nature. We need to plant as we can trees, because the trees is our long, you know. Trees, you know, the trees, the flowers, and every, you know, wild trees, the bees using it as taking a pollen from it and using it to make honey and to feed small bees. So if we look at the trees and we keep working, planting will be good for us, and the bees can work as well for us, like to pollination, flowers, vegetables, trees, whatever. So we need to focus about our nature, our environment, and thank you so much.
What we've got here is kind of a more familiar sight in the Irish landscape, and it's what we as utilitarian humans use for the production of timber. So what we've got here is Sitka spruce, Pisces hichensis, an individual tree species that's not native to Ireland but rather is native to the Pacific Northwest of America. Now, in Europe, we had a succession of ice ages that pushed species south and brought them north again. And if we ever had an equivalent species here in Ireland, it was probably lost during the interglacial period. So as a human society, we need to use timber. We're obliged to use timber, and we should use timber. It's captured carbon. B, it can be used for building instead of really carbon expensive products, I suppose, such as cement, steel, plastics, etc., that are very carbon expensive to produce. So it's a fantastic alternative that we need to get better at engineering and using. And I suppose as the population grows, we need more and more timber, and it's important to realise that, you know, that timber is an essential resource. Sitka spruce is managed pretty much as a horticultural crop, you know, as we grow barley or as we grow wheat, whereas instead of having a clear fell every year as we do with barley and wheat, it's once every 40 years or so to produce timber for use in society. Within the plantation itself, it's pretty limited what's going on biodiversity wise under the canopy, but there's quite a lot of birds active in the canopy, and squirrels. When you're planting woodland for timber production, you have to set aside at least 15% for biodiversity under current grant conditions. So you have to leave open space, you have to plant at least 10% of the planted area with native trees as well. You have to set back from any aquatic zones to ensure they're protected. And so that 15% within a plantation actually serves a great purpose in that there's no grazers within a woodland, unless of course we have deer coming in. So those little pockets are free from grazing pressure that happens on the typical open hill landscape here in Ireland. We're now standing in a managed oak wood. This has been planted with a mixture of oak, Scots pine, and then some European larch as well. So what we're talking about here is basically managing native trees for a timber resource, and it's a great thing to be doing. However, we are talking about managing trees on a rotation of like 100 plus years, really, to produce timber for society. So we have to realise that it's going to be slow. There's a lot of work involved with using native trees for timber. For instance, in this particular stand, I've been in here 3 or 4 times now shaping the oak in order to keep them growing straight, because unlike a conifer tree, they'll tend to grow more bushy if left to their own devices. The idea here is that you gradually remove the larch, you gradually remove the Scots pine. They're in as kind of nurse species to help the oak develop, to help it grow upwards and to keep it contained. And then we take those out. So in here, what we've done is we've marked the better trees with orange tape that we're going to retain, and we're going to focus the growth on these guys. So we cut out their competitors that aren't doing as well, and as they get more space for growing, they'll expand and put on more timber. And while managing native trees and using them for timber is super important, it has to be understood that it takes a long time, and it takes an awful lot of work, manual intervention, for it to happen. So we have to be conscious of that as a society as well.
We're here today on James Breslau's demonstration farm for Inishowen Uplands European Innovation Partnership project. Agroforestry is a huge part of our project, and what we have done on James's farm is look to see where we can incorporate trees that will complement the existing livestock on the farm. We don't necessarily want to replace livestock with trees, but we know that trees and agroforestry will have a huge value for the animals in James's farm in terms of shelter, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of lengthening the grazing season. And we're very excited about what we're doing here. We feel that every farm has a place for trees, and we just need to develop a mechanism to allow farmers to do this without actually being penalised for doing it. So we're planting trees here in wet areas, in dry areas, in riparian zones, in areas for shelter, in areas to protect water courses. So there's a huge variety of what we're actually able to do, and hopefully we'll develop this into a mechanism that can be used by all farmers to plant more trees in the future.
Right, my name is James Brasson here. This is my farm. We're up here in Redcastle. We're creating a green barn. I'm on the EIP. We're setting a few trees here, hazel, birch, oak, round tree, just native woodland trees, and we're just trying to get a bit of shelter for my animals. You know, and this here, there are tree guards going around them so that the animals can run around them all the time. You haven't to close them off. They can graze all year round. And we're doing this as a trial to see how it works. Okay.
Hi, my name is Shauna McClenaghan, Joint CEO of Inishowen Development Partnership. We in IDP have been involved in a variety of projects over the past few years that support awareness raising and actions on biodiversity and sustainable development. This includes our Thinking Trees series, which would work with primary schools across Inishowen. This was supported by Concern. Also, working with Caledonian Community School and the students there, we planted fruit trees and provided bees, creating a small apiary there. Working with Barrackhill Community Garden, we had an espalier workshop, and we also were involved in tree planting there. Under our Changemakers Seeds for Change programme, we provided funding to groups such as ArtLink at Fort Dunree for their tiny forest project. We worked with Scullysagon in their walled garden with tree planting and workshops. Our new Wellbeing from Nature project offers further opportunities to develop some of projects just like this. And of course, we're delighted to be involved with the Eco Cairn network, which has gone from strength to strength. All of these projects send a clear message that we should not take our biodiversity for granted, that we all have a part to play in addressing the challenges of biodiversity loss and climate change. To raise awareness and action, we can all make a difference, both as individuals and as communities working together. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Trish Murphy. I'm the Project Officer with the Inishowen Rivers Trust. Over the last 5 years, the Trust has distributed free trees to landowners and other people around Inishowen, anyone who has a bit of space that they'd like to plant a tree in. Here's some trees that have arrived this year from Trees on the Land. These are alder. Now alder is a very good tree to plant next to a river because alders don't mind getting their roots wet. Other trees that you might plant by a river would be downy birch, and willow is a great one as well. Now of course, if you do plant trees by a river, then it's very important that you manage them well. So don't leave them go for years. Make sure that you crop them back in time and maintain them. This prevents debris from getting into the rivers and clogging up at culverts and bridges. So over the last 5 years, we've distributed over 3,000 trees to the people in Inishowen, and these trees have been mostly planted by our volunteers as well. So we'd like to say a big shout out to all our volunteers who love their tree planting, and happy Tree Week, everyone.
This tree planting occurred under the former principal, Mr. Paul Fiorentini, who was way ahead of his time in terms of retaining and extending the native biodiversity of the school campus. In 2004, CCS had a project with a section of Donegal County Council which saw us plant approximately 3,000 trees across the perimeter of the school. The purpose was to create a forest walk, encourage wildlife, establish a shelter belt for the more exposed parts of the campus, and give the pupils an appreciation for the wonder and grandeur of trees. We concentrated on the native species of oak, birch, beech, ash, alder, rowan, and a small number of Scots pine for an evergreen effect. The trees were planted by the pupils under the supervision of Mr. Jennings and Pat O'Connor. Most of these trees are very well established, but are not evident when driving past the front of the school, but can be seen from higher vantage points, such as the town church or from the opposite bank of the river. However, a distinct corpse of trees, mainly birch, is thriving on the land nearest to the Donaghcross. We also planted beech trees at the front of the school to continue the line of majestic beech trees outside the math building and Unit 4, but some of these did not succeed in the very damp soil there, and have since been replaced by aspens, which are doing very well. We also planted some distinctive white birch outside the Aris above the car park. The most recent planting was in the Memorial Garden, where there are a number of distinctive young trees, including some Italian alder and oak. It is hoped to plant a small stock of native ash in the coming weeks.
Hi, my name is Sinead Smith. I represent the Forest of Caledonian, which is a local initiative led by a team of dedicated volunteers planting trees in gardens and school grounds across Inishowen.
We're standing at the entrance to the Barrack Hill Park, and this is the main entrance. It's on the Baldusky Road, and as you can see into the right here, we have a nice new area. It's all been landscaped, and a number of trees.
These are 3 birch trees that were planted in the Barrack Hill Town Park last October.
Last year we planted 400 trees, native species, in local schools, including St Patrick's Boys' School, St Patrick's Girls' School, Dona National School, Craigtown, Rashini, Glentower, Glassos, Mallintown and Kildare.
These are our community orchard fruit trees. We got 2 pears, 2 apple trees and 1 plum tree from the Tree Council.
They're mainly native Irish trees. There will be rowan trees, mountain ash, asper, and a variety of others.
And we set another 5 trees from the Tree Council, fruit trees, at the bottom of this area of planting.
So we're very proud to be able to work together to increase biodiversity locally with planting native trees and to reduce our carbon footprint wherever we can.